One of the most important things that you can do as a civil engineer in your career is take action. Be proactive. And our guest for today has done that time and again in her career. Today's guest, young Koprowski, is the president and founder for Y2K Engineering, a firm that she started to get more flexibility for herself, and she's now grown it to 25 people and growing strong. In this episode, Young is going to take us through her journey of building her company and also talk about transportation and some of the technology and some of the things that her firm is focused on to help better society. Let's jump right in. All right, now I'd like to welcome our guest onto the show for today. Young Koprowski is a licensed professional engineer. She's the principal and CEO of Y2K Engineering. Young, welcome to the Civil Engineering CEO.
Thank you so much, Anthony.
So just to get us started off, Young, tell us a little bit about, the company, where you're located, the type of services that you offer, how big is the company? Just give us a little bit of background on Y2K.
Sure. I founded Y2K Engineering 7 years ago. And it started out with just me, but now we've grown to 25 people and 2 offices. We're headquartered out of Mesa, Arizona, and we also have an office in Denver, Colorado.
Wow, that's awesome. I mean, I know how it is to grow a small business, which is not easy, and 25 is a lot. So take me through that, I guess, the decision to start your own company, what kind of excited you to do that? What was tell us about the inspiration behind that.
It was probably mostly just changes in my life outside of work at the time. I had 2 young children. I had my father-in-law was in poor health, so he just needed some additional assistance at home. And I didn't want to continue making a commute into Phoenix to work. And so I needed flexibility, felt that starting my own company was going to give me the best chance for that flexibility. Had a lot of encouragement from people in the industry, from my husband and other family members that really made it possible to make that happen. And then once I got started, it just kind of took off on its own. It's been a great journey. I've had so many great partners and have been able to continue to do the work that I love, but also give that opportunity to others. So I've been able to create this company that I wanted to work for.
Yeah, that's awesome. And when you started the company, Young, I'm curious if you thought, it would be for now, just do something on my own just to get some of that flexibility. Did you anticipate having 25 people and it growing as fast as it did, or is that just something that happened?
No, in the beginning, my business plan, I was actually looking back at it recently. My business plan was to have maybe $300,000 in revenue a year, maybe have 1 or 2 people working at the company. That was the initial thought, that it could just stay small. I could just make it work with just myself and a couple others, but it just naturally grew. And so I quickly had to re-strategize my business plan. So in 2019, a couple of years after I started, really got some outside help to help me create the vision for the company. And they pushed me to reach higher goals. And that's exactly what we've been doing. So we've been executing on that business plan for the past 5 years. And that's made all the difference.
That's awesome. That's great. Well, good for you. And, congratulations. I know it's not easy to grow a small business. There's kind of a lot of different hats you have to wear and things you have to juggle, but it looks like it's going well. So let's dive into that a little bit more, because I know that kind of as the CEO of a company, one of the things that you really need to focus on is company culture. And I'm interested to learn a little bit about how you foster a culture of kind of innovation and inclusivity within your team, especially for women, minorities, and young professionals in your organization.
Absolutely. It's so important that we as a company owner or as leaders in our own organizations, that we foster a culture that is inclusive and that is someplace that our employees want to come to work every day. Being in the transportation industry, the work that we do directly affects the community. So overall, our projects are very purpose-filled. So that's the easy part. I think the hard part sometimes from a leadership perspective is ensuring that the environment that people are given to work in fit them and their lifestyle, especially because people's lives change over time and there's different circumstances that I try to accommodate. And that's through understanding, going through it myself, flexibility. I started the company in 2017. And at that time, wide adoption of technology and working remotely wasn't really the norm. It is now, which is fantastic. But I think adopting cloud-based computing and being able to have that flexibility to work from different places really fostered an environment where the people that work for me can appreciate that. And so by being able to cater towards people with a lot of different lifestyles, I think that naturally makes it inclusive for people of different backgrounds, whether they're women or minorities or young professionals. And so that's been a really great strategy for me. I also love celebrating different culture because for myself, I have different traditions and cultural backgrounds. So I think that it makes it a little bit easier when they can see someone in leadership with that background as well.
No, I think that's great. I mean, I think that culture is so important. And I like to think of culture as, what people feel about like coming to work every day, working in your organization, how it makes them feel. And I think the fact that, to your point, I think back in 2017, the idea that civil engineering companies could be remote was like, people were like, are you crazy? Like, we need to print, we need to be at the conference room table, we need to do all these things. It's like never going to happen. And then like March 2020 overnight, civil engineering companies are all remote, right? So it just goes to show you that there's always like limiting beliefs out there. And there's always things that, people say you can't do, but you actually can. And when you're like forced to push yourself a little bit. So it's great that you're able to really focus on flexibility. And like you said, that was like a need for you and why you started the business. So I think that that's probably really beneficial for your team members, knowing that you have that background, that it's likely going to be a company culture that's flexible since it was kind of created out of that necessity, so to speak. So
yes, exactly.
I think that's great. All right, let's talk technical a little bit. I know that you work a lot in the transportation industry. Talk a little bit about the idea of, AI is everywhere, technology is everywhere these days. How do you approach the challenge of integrating intelligent transportation systems? You may have heard of it, some of our listeners, as ITS, like implementing them into existing urban infrastructure.
That's a great question, and it's going to continue to be a challenge as we continue to move forward. At its core, ITS is implemented to enhance efficiency, safety, and sustainability of transportation networks through advanced technologies, and is layered on top of the basic infrastructure. But the foundational challenge I see is embedding that necessary communication infrastructure that allows for that seamless interaction between devices and a central control center. And I think that's a big challenge for public agencies also because of the way that they think about capital improvement projects and how they program those. And so in order to invest in the infrastructure to make that communication happen, that you can then tie in all of the ITS devices into, that takes a lot of investment and collaboration. And even if one jurisdiction decides to do that, it doesn't necessarily help the traveling public that may be traveling through many jurisdictions in a day. It requires a regional collaboration and approach. And so you have to have local champions, you have to have trust, you have to have highly technical staff in very specific areas, and then long-term dedicated resources to ensure that infrastructure can remain and be that foundation for those devices. When we think about technology in our own homes, I'm going to use cell phones as an example. We want the latest model. We want to replace our cell phones every 2 years. That model doesn't fit in with how government currently procures any kind of infrastructure. Right. It's like maybe decided on 8 years in advance, maybe budgeted 5 years in advance. And so how can you plan and budget for something that hasn't even been invented yet, or that hasn't even been, I guess, fully developed? And so there's a little bit of the chicken and the egg situation happening with any ITS. I think that there are some good examples of regions that have really invested and done it well, but I think it's always going to be a challenge because when you think about a CIP project, they want a device that's going to last for 10 years. Well, when you think about ITS, you really don't want a device out there for 10 years before it gets updated or upgraded. So you need to be thinking a little bit more in kind of the reality of technology. And that's a little bit of a disconnect that I see that I think it is still going to be a continual challenge.
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing to think about because it's really like a moving part, right, with these projects that is very variable and it's really hard to nail down. But when you're working on projects like this, they're multi-year, right, kind of mega transportation projects, and you can't have that many variables on a project like that because, project management doesn't like variables, right? You need to have a project plan, you need to have a schedule, you need to have a budget. And so that's going to be, I think, a big challenge, not just in the transportation sector, but I think probably many sectors of civil engineering going forward, just because the technology in our industry is advancing so fast. Like you said, by the time someone budgets for it, it's basically obsolete. And then you have to think about the next thing that you're going to need to incorporate into your projects. And I think also for consultants, and also, I guess, for the public entities that are working together, it's a part of a project that didn't always exist, right? Like you didn't have the whole technology component where you're thinking about ITS or other things to integrate into your project. So from a project management standpoint, it's a whole nother kind of part of your project to plan for and work around. So it's a really interesting topic. And I think it's only going to continue to get, like you said, more challenging and more advanced as different things come into play.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to switch gears a little bit here because this is interesting. You also have a role as a council member for Gilbert, Arizona. Talk a little bit about how that came about and how you kind of balance your responsibilities to the community with your duties as the president and CEO of Y2K.
A few years ago, I was volunteering for a citizens transportation task force in Gilbert. That's where I live with my family. I volunteered for that task force because I wanted a seat at the table and helping to make decisions for transportation projects that were going to come to voters through a general obligation bond. And I found that experience really fascinating, really interesting to be a part of. I felt that in my own community, we were falling behind on multimodal transportation, and I wanted to ensure that we still had the eye on the ball to make sure that we were still looking at some of those more innovative projects that incorporated ITS and incorporated facilities for people that wanted to walk and bike. And so that's why I first got involved. And then when I was serving on that task force, they were recruiting for council members at the time because 3 council members were coming off and they were going to be appointing 3 council members in 2020. I put my hat in the ring in January of 2020. Out of over 100 applicants, I was selected for interviewed right as the pandemic lockdown was happening on St. Patrick's Day, and was then ultimately appointed to council in 2020. Even though it was a very challenging time in society, I find a lot of gratification from supporting the community, from being able to lend my knowledge of civil engineering to the work that a town or city does. And that's such a big part of the community that I felt it was important to have that voice at the table. I did end up running for election in 2022. So I was elected for a full 4-year term, and that's what I'm serving right now. But I've been able to participate in not only projects that advance transportation in the community, but also in a lot of other community initiatives that I think just make the town a great place for my kids to grow up in, for people to live and have a great quality of life. So I've been balancing it primarily because I try to be really good at time management. In the beginning, it was the pandemic, so there weren't as many in-person events. So that helped a little bit. As the events came back, I've had to compartmentalize a lot of my time and ensure that I say no to the things that are absolutely not the most important. And then I have a lot of great help from my family, my husband, my mother, and from the people at my company, being able to delegate and rely on them, knowing that they're going to do a great job on the projects. That's made it possible. But overall, it's been a great learning experience as well, kind of beyond just the consulting side, to really understand the challenges and roadblocks and barriers that may not be as visible from the traffic engineering groups, but that I can recognize from more of that political or leadership level, and then try to navigate through that for our clients as well.
That's great. I think it's great. I mean, I think it's important to have civil engineers involved in the community in that way, because, our jobs are so connected to the community and the safety and the welfare of the public, that to be able to have some say in that through being, on a board or in a position where you have some ability to have some influence and put some of your ideas and bring them to the table, I think is really, really great. So that's awesome that you're doing that. And I guess one follow-up question I would have to that is, going back to the balance piece of it, you started the company and it was pretty much you, and now it's 25 people. And I'm wondering, I know that's a difficult thing for engineers to disconnect from some of the technical work and delegate and give some stuff up. And I'm wondering how that process was for you, being that obviously with some of these other things you're doing, you just have to do it. I mean, because you have to disconnect. I'm just wondering how you were able to go through that process and how that is for you.
I think it was pretty natural for me. We talked a little bit about company culture earlier on, and part of that being able to have a company culture that's flexible, where people actually are encouraged to take vacation and enjoy life outside of work, also meant that the company has to have a lot of duplication between people that can do similar things. And we almost have pairs or partners with everybody, so that if someone is out or gone, we always know we have someone else that can jump in and take over. So we're very much of a team-oriented organization. And I always want to impart knowledge and growth into other people in the industry. I cannot do everything myself, and I recognize that. And so I want to encourage everyone else to step up and also learn how to contribute, whether it's through engineering, whether it's through leadership, volunteerism. I think that it's just part of who I am, is that I really just want to encourage others to kind of have that opportunity. And there have been times, especially with kind of the gap in staff that came into the industry during the recession, we've had to challenge some of our younger staff to really step up and take on more responsibility. And it might be better for them to have a little bit more technical experience. But for us, we are all kind of seller doers. So one day I may be project managing a project, and then another day I may just be supporting another project. And I think that our mindset is that we wear multiple hats, and we are willing to roll up our sleeves and jump in at any level to support the project and the overall mission of having a great product for our community or for our clients, because ultimately that serves the community and is a benefit. So for me, I think it's been pretty easy. And then overall, obviously, you have to have good financial background to make that happen, to be able to hire the people to fill in for those positions. And I think I've just had a knack for the business side as well to make sure that was in good balance. So overall, it's been a great journey, has lots of ups and downs, but it's provided so much satisfaction and a great opportunity for the people that work at Y2K and for myself.
No, it's great. And I think that's that transition, or that ability to let go and delegate, I think is definitely something that is different for every person. Me personally, it was easy for me. I'm kind of someone who says, hey, give it a shot. If it doesn't work out, we'll have to fix it. I don't want to keep doing it all myself. And it sounds like you're kind of along the same lines, whereas there are certainly technical professionals that struggle with that, because, when we come out of school, all we'll do is calculations and reports and all this stuff. And then we finally get the hang of it, and they're like, okay, now you're a PM, let everyone else do it. And you're like, I don't know if I could do that. So it's good to hear that you're okay with it. I mean, I'm okay with it, but I know it certainly can be a challenge. And I think for those leaders out there that might be listening, you may be okay with it too, but your next leader that you're promoting may not be. So you just need to be aware that sometimes there is a little bit of a barrier for someone being able to take that next step in leadership and delegate and really let go. I mean, the way to say it is it's hard to let go But, if you keep mentoring them, and I try to show people, like, if you don't do this anymore, what else will you be able to do? And they're like, oh, wow, you're right. If I'm not doing that, I could be doing more sales, more proposals, more, networking and stuff like that. So I think you have to think about the big picture a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about, you mentioned the community just a few minutes ago. How do you kind of prioritize your projects and your initiatives at Y2K Engineering to align with kind of your mission of improving the community kind of mobility and safety? Talk about how you think about that big picture.
Absolutely. As a small business, I think one benefit is we know that in the transportation industry, there's a big pie to share of projects. And so we focus on projects that we know we're going to excel in, that we do very well, that we're going to be nimble and provide value. And those projects might include focus on transportation safety. They may focus on active transportation. We also do traffic signal design and signing and striping design. But having those projects that are community focused, such as safe routes to school, or focusing on the community mobility and safety projects, for us, we've just always focused on it from day one. And when you're passionate about a subject, it's easy to sell that. When you are passionate about it, you do a good job, the work just continues to come and you become known for those types of projects. So I think that's how we've been able to continue to be able to work on those projects and still grow the business, is to simply make sure that we're taking on projects that are going to be successful, that are providing value, and then also doing a great job. And we don't take anything for granted. We're always, our focus on new projects is always trying to understand what the client's challenges are, what their greatest needs are, what's going to make that successful. There's no cookie cutter approach to our projects. And I think that's been a great strategy for us.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think that the fact that you're really focused on community is such a big thing, right? Because to me, like, that's kind of what civil engineering is, quite frankly, right? Like, we're focused on bettering our communities through the work that we do. And yes, like if you're working with, let's say, a DOT, you want to make sure that the client's very happy and you do a good roadway project for them. But ultimately, like you said, that's going to be a positive effect for the community. They're going to benefit from it, the people that are driving on those roads, walking on those roads, et cetera. So, and I think that's really, like, as a civil engineer, why I love civil engineering, because like you're going to work every day and you're basically making the world a better place. I mean, quite frankly. So, I mean, people ask me, like, what do civil engineers do? I'm like, look outside. Like, find
absolutely.
something that they don't work on. You know what I mean? So I love that you're really focused around community. And that kind of goes into my next question, which is, we talked a little bit about ITS before, but how do you envision like the future of just walking and biking and transit in urban development and planning as we move forward?
So I've been hyper focused on road safety, and this really lends itself to that. What we know is that there's been a lot of growth and migration to urban areas over rural areas over the past several years. So the exposure of people walking and biking just continues to rise. And so there's a really strong correlation between the walking and biking in urban areas and civil engineering related to road safety. With the federal bipartisan infrastructure law, there's a lot of resources that are being pumped into this area. And that's going to have a massive influence on urban development and planning, which I think will have very positive impacts, but it's going to really shape how we look at building our cities for the future. We can't just wish that injuries and fatalities from motor vehicle crashes are going to be reduced. In the past, we've had planning efforts that say this is our goal and these are our targets, but they're really divorced from reality. They don't have the implementation behind it, the funding and the resources. You don't have that tie between targets and actions. If you do this, you will save this many lives and it's going to cost this much money. You have to really connect all those dots, which I think is what the current federal legislature is helping to do. And honestly, civil engineers know what to do to improve safety. It's not about what we're going to do. It's about commitment to action, picking something and doing it. So for me, I think for an urban environment, that's where we are really going to start focusing. And then also tying it back to your earlier conversation about ITS, smart cities is kind of that description. But what does that really mean? It's just a layer upon layer upon layered approach of the infrastructure, the basic infrastructure, plus the technology. But ultimately, some of that technology is in place to either make vehicle travel more efficient, or it's to help with the safety of all road users. So we have to always start with the why and understand that these are all just tools that are layered together to ultimately make the community a better place to live, where our residents don't have to think about the dangers or risks that they have. And that's why I think sometimes civil engineers don't get the credit that they deserve, because if everything's going really well, you don't even know.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And, I think I've had the chance in my career to do some coaching for some engineers, career coaching, and help advise some of them. And what I always try to advise is that they be very proactive in their career and they take action. And it seems like in your career, Young, you've done that kind of over and over. You took action to starting your own business and you've built it up. You took action by getting involved in local government. You've committed to that. You've really taken action in trying to make your community and the communities, surrounding communities better. And I think that that's a good lesson for engineers because, everyone could have these ideas, right? But ideas are one thing, but making them happen means you have to actually, like you were saying, do something and put it into action if you want to achieve those goals. And so I definitely commend you on, it seems like those are all things you've taken action. I'm sure you're already planning some other things that you're going to be taking action on as long as you can balance them. But I guess kind of for my last question here, I would just kind of ask you, like, what would be one piece of advice that you would offer to like aspiring engineers, especially maybe women or minorities or younger professionals out there that are really looking to have a great career in the civil engineering field?
I think that civil engineering should be one of the top considerations for any student coming into the workforce. One, it's always essential. As you mentioned, just look outside. The word civil comes from civilization. So everything related to civilization is what we work on. So there's some job security there. I think it's a great career because from a financial standpoint, it's also fairly well paying. It provides a lot of satisfaction, I think, and a lot of variety. You can pick from so many different areas, and you don't necessarily have to be an engineering type. It's not stereotypical. There are so many areas where we need support, and that can range from public engagement to planning to the actual design. There's a lot of creativity in some of the conceptual design and work that we do kind of pre-final design. And I think that anyone can come into the field and should consider it because of those reasons. And I hope that we see them coming into the field in droves because there's such a great need. We have a severe shortage of engineers compared to the needs that we have. And so I would just encourage anyone. Also, it may feel a little bit daunting and it may be out of someone's comfort zone. But for me, I think one thing that I learned early on is that you're not growing if you're not uncomfortable. And so it's really important to recognize that you need to take that step to get out of your comfort zone and that it can be learned. I was the most reserved wallflower when I was in high school and college, and I have learned and grown and become the person that I am today through a lot of different experiences and coaching, and anyone can do the same if they invest in themselves.
That's great. Well, Young Koprowski, President CEO of Y2K Engineering, I want to thank you so much for spending some time with us today on the Civil Engineering CEO. You're doing awesome stuff. I hope that a lot of civil engineers will be able to watch this and kind of follow a little bit in your footsteps around taking action in their careers. So thank you so much, Young, for your time.
Thank you, Anthony.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Young. She is a dynamic civil engineer. She has started her firm, grew her firm, and she keeps taking action. And I hope she inspires you to do the same. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing to our channel here. We do put out videos like this on a weekly basis to help engineers become better managers and leaders. I'll see you next week.